Thank you everyone for joining the International Energy Symposium 2022. Before our final round of speakers, if you do have any questions for the presenters, please leave them in the chat box or hold on to them until the Q&A session after all the speakers and raise your hand and then unmute. Thank you for your patience. And for our final round of speakers, we will be focusing on women in green energy. Starting off with Dr. Na Li from TU Delft, who focuses her research on integrated community energy systems. Dr. Na Li, please.
Good afternoon. Good morning, it should be. Good morning, everyone. So it's my great pleasure to be here today, and thanks for your invitation. And today I'd like to share. First, maybe I can have a brief introduction about myself. So I did my PhD at the Delft University of Technology, and my supervisor is Sophia and Luxo. So my PhD topic is about cost allocation in integrated community energy system. And I already graduated in February this year. And after that, I worked several months at the Green Village in the university. And now I got a postdoc position in the US at the Idaho National Laboratory. So I'm going there soon. And today I'm very glad to share my research here. So in my research, so what I did is mainly about cost allocation in integrated community system, and we can say it is a local community energy system. So with the current energy transition, most of the research is about renewable integration into the large power system, and what are the impacts in the on the operation of the transmission distribution network. But in my research, I focus on the local level, so community level, on the residential sector. So all the houses, because I think for the end users, the houses, they are normally they are negative, or we can say passive consumers in the power system, but now they are becoming prosumers with the installation of the distributed energy resources. So if we have a community energy system with a lot of, if we say it's 100% renewable generation, and also with some storage, and then what will happen to the system? So there are a lot of research about the technical part and also social technical part, but for the techno-economic analysis part is not extensively addressed, especially about the cost allocation, how to allocate the cost. Because if we have the community energy system and we have the different business models for the community energy system, so if you are an investor, so you can invest in the community energy system and sell the electricity to the houses inside the community. And then how do you get your return on investment, and how do you get your profits in the process? So this is what I mainly do. And so based on this, because we have the examples from the large power system, because they have the hybrid designs, because the hybrid is the integration between interconnection between the producers and the end users. So here, the cost allocation is the interconnection between the investor and the houses in the community. And then it's necessary to set a rational, reasonable, and also affordable prices for the houses to accept, and they can pay for the bills. Because if the energy price is very high, then the houses say, oh, why I would like to stay in your community? I would opt for the grid. And then, so in the research, a lot of cost allocation methods are designed for cost allocation. Besides this, because now there is no regulatory principles for the local community energy system and also for the cost allocation. So it's necessary for the local community members for them to satisfy with the cost allocation. So their opinions or their preference also should be taken into account in the process. So how to make it social acceptable for the local community members? That's also another very interesting topic, and it's also addressed in my research. So if you are a consumer or a prosumer or a household in the community, you say, for me, I would like to contribute to the green consumption or generation. So it doesn't matter how much I pay. So I don't care about the energy price. But for the others, they don't have a good income, and they would say, okay, for me, I'm very care about the energy price. So they need to have the freedom to express their preference or willingness freely. And then based on this, the community manager, the system manager can help them to make a decision to select the method that the cost allocation method that can be satisfy all the preference for all the community members. So that's okay. That's a very brief introduction about my PhD research, and after that, I worked on hydrogen system. So as a green village, it is a 24/7 energy lab, and now they have a pilot project to show the economic feasibility of hydrogen. So, but what they would like to do is about green hydrogen. So the hydrogen is generated from the solar or wind generation, and then because currently the facilities for hydrogen, such as the electrolyzer, hydrogen tank, compressor, and the fuel cell, these components are very expensive. And also, if you want to be a self-sufficient energy system, it would cost a lot. So based on this, I did an economic feasibility analysis to compare the current energy price with the price that can be provided by the hydrogen system, and to see if it's economic feasibility for the houses or for the local community energy system. And yes, the conclusion, I think maybe you know, it's not possible, or it's very expensive for the community or for the houses to afford such high prices. But we also did some prediction about the cost reduction in the future. So if the cost in the future can reduce into half percentage compared to the price at this moment, and then the electricity price in the future would be affordable for the local community. So okay, so I think that's about my research, and if you have any question or if you are interested in more detail about my project, and please come to me, and I would like to have a discussion or talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nali, for your sharing on your research regarding the integrated community energy systems. Next, we have Dr. Vasunhara from India, who is a faculty in charge at the Symbiosis Center for Management and Human Resources Development, with more than a decade's worth of experience in the energy industry and teaching courses in economy and energy. Dr. Vasunhara, please.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm just going to check you can all hear me. Matthew, can you confirm that? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'd like to start by saying my hello to Dr. Nali. Very happy to be co-paneling with Tulika and Dr. Manaswita. And I thank Anokhi for reaching out. And I really think it's a great initiative that you've brought women representatives in a sector which been, overpoweringly represented by men. So I'm very happy, and thank you for organizing this. So like Matthew said, I am a faculty of energy and economics with Symbiosis in Pune. I have a short presentation. Is it okay if I share my screen, Matthew? Okay.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so here we go. So I'm just going to start by giving a little bit of introduction about myself. I've been in energy since 2006, and I've had a variety of roles. 2006 to 2009, I was with GE Energy with their thermal energy division. Before that, in academics, I've done my master's and bachelor's in economics from Delhi University. I come to the energy sector, starting with GE Energy, where I spent a lot of time in doing analysis, statistical analysis for the Yenbaka systems. In 2009, I moved to the alternate energy industry with Suzlon. And for the next 5 or 6 years, I worked in wind energy regulations as well as operational program management. In 2014, I moved to Symbiosis, where I started to pursue my PhD in renewable energy. And since then, I've been involved in teaching, research, and consultancy for renewable energy projects. So if you see my trajectory, it's been a movement from an analytical piece to understanding the sector regulations and how operations take place in the energy industry, and finally on to teaching it along with doing research and consultancy in the field. Now, I'm just going to start off by talking about how the definition of energy seems to be changing. If you ask me, energy is a multidimensional concept today, where there are 3 to 4 key pillars of understanding. I represent here the 3 pillars. I'm going to talk about the 4th after I conclude the slide. The first pillar is that of energy access, where we define as a percentage of population with access to energy, and for both cooking as well as electricity purposes. The main goal here is to identify how fast can we reach as a nation to 100% access. If you look at figures from India, we are saying 97% have access to on-grid supply, 2.5% continue to be unelectrified, and about 0.5% of the population depends on off-grid systems. All of you must know by now that off-grid systems refer to battery-backed systems. The second pillar of energy is what Dr. Nali also spoke about, which is the energy transition. There's a big debate going on today of increasing the share of clean energy in the national energy mix. And the debate really is how quickly can we decarbonize? How quickly can we move from thermal sources to renewables in all the 3 sectors of importance? And the 3 sectors are electricity, transport, and cooking. And if you look at each sector separately, you will see that renewable share is improving. We've reached about 38% of installed capacity of renewables in India in electricity. In transport, we see a lot of movement in the electric vehicle segment. In cooking, we see an uptick in solar cookers. But apart from the electricity sector, I would say the transition is fairly slow. The third pillar is of energy efficiency, where we want to continue with our current level of energy consumption, but reduce the amount of pollution that emanates from it. The debate today really is how we encourage energy efficient behavior through introduction of energy efficient appliances and energy efficient behavior. In our homes, we may see appliances which come with star ratings, and those really are an effort to bring in energy efficient behavior. In all the 3 pillars, renewables can and will play a key role, whether it is to improve access, whether it is to improve efficiency, or whether it is to improve transition. But like Dr. Nali said, we have to think about RE integration issues. We need to improve the RE share, but we need to be cautious. Coming to the 4th pillar that I didn't speak about on the slide, and I really believe that is something that is under-researched, is the topic of energy literacy. If you take a sample and you ask them, what do you know about your own energy consumption? Chances are people will be in the dark. So energy literacy is something that I think the research world needs to start talking about, because None of this can happen unless people are aware of what they are doing. What is my research focus? My research focus has primarily been on energy transition in the electricity sector. Typically, who's undertaking this transition? There are different consumer segments. So domestic is something that Dr. Nali spoke about, residential community systems. But there are other segments of consumers who are also looking at renewables in order to transition. And these are commercial, industrial, and agricultural consumers. My research focus is very limited to the commercial and industrial consumers. I also research on why they need to transition. What encourages them towards this transition? So if an industrial consumer wants to do renewables, why do they want to do it? And finally, how do they do this transition? What are the ways in which this transition is possible? Now I'm going to share the next 2-3 slides on a case or a research that I was a part of, which is to do with scaling up renewable purchase amongst the large electricity consumers in India. So my research question really was, how can we improve RE procurement amongst consumers which are commercial and industrial consumers of electricity? Let's start by understanding the need for RE procurement amongst commercial and industrial consumers. We have to first understand that electricity is a key input to the production process of goods and services. So whether you pick up a manufacturing unit or an educational institute or a hospital, they all use electricity as a very key vital process for their business. As a result of that, these consumers pay very heavily for electricity. Not only is electricity a very big part of their expenditure, it is so because they pay at a rate higher than domestic and agricultural consumers. And in India, that is very famously known as the cross-subsidy principle, which is to say that if you pick up any CNI consumer, a commercial or industrial consumer at random, they are going to pay for electricity at 12 rupees a unit, whereas a residential consumer will pay at 7 rupees a unit. And these are average figures that I'm talking about. Of course, it's not an apple-to-apple comparison. But this makes a point very clear that CNI consumers are getting hit by their electricity bills. Now, this really increases their cost of power consumption. A large chunk of CNI consumers' operational expenditure is spent in electricity consumption, and this motivates them to migrate. That's a term called energy migration. Energy migration refers to finding alternate sources of power supply which are cheaper than the grid supply. And in India, renewables is presenting a very good and a cheap option. Let's also understand that when CNI consumers migrate to RE-based supplies, whether it is rooftop solar, whether it is an open access, whether it is a diesel generator set, the power utilities or the distribution companies end up losing revenue because these paying consumers are no longer staying within the utilities network, right? So, therefore, the distribution companies are reluctant to give approval to the CNI consumers to migrate to RE-based supply. So, therefore, the transition that the CNI consumer wants to make is not necessarily successful and is not necessarily easy. So, the research question that I worked with was that how do these consumers prefer to migrate? What are their preferred options of renewable purchase? Is it open access? Is it rooftop solar? Or is it doing their own captive projects? What are the barriers they face in this transition? And what new instruments can be introduced to upscale RE procurement? When we did that study, we spoke to companies that are either large corporates as defined by their business revenue, or to MSME organizations who are smaller in size. The sample that we worked with were a total of 286 companies, wherein 101 large companies and 185 MSME companies were contacted from 5 Indian cities of the research interest. We recruited respondents through purposive sampling. So we reached out to one person who knew about the RE procurement process, and then from there on, we snowballed to other companies. As far as the methodology is concerned, we could have approached this question in 2 ways. We could have looked at a quantitative analysis where we create an instrument, use Likert scales, collect data from 500 people and use probabilistic sampling methods. But we didn't do that. We looked at a qualitative analysis where we created survey instruments. We conducted small sample surveys. So in both large companies as well as MSMEs, we conducted interviews with 15 to 25 respondents in each city. And we chose our respondent through non-probabilistic methods. Why did we choose this? Because research today says the data can't capture what words can say. You can't, in a lighter note, you can't go to somebody on a deathbed and ask, how are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 5? It's much better to ask them how they feel and record the text data rather than asking them on a Likert scale. So that's why we chose the research methodology to be qualitative. How did we collect our data? We collected our data with one-on-one semi-structured interviews that were conducted online and face-to-face. We asked questions that were as per a discussion guide, created separately for each stakeholder group. And the text data that we collected created a data corpus. And it came to analysis. We conducted two types of analysis. One called thematic analysis. In thematic analysis, you identify the text data and you discover themes and factors that help you identify the barriers and challenges for RE purchase. We did this analysis using a software called QDA Miner. And to make the analysis more robust, we complemented thematic analysis with sentiment analysis. Sentiment analysis is a qualitative technique that uses text data to highlight positive and negative sentiments associated with channels of RE purchase. For example, we may have found a respondent saying, we want to do rooftop solar, but we don't have enough roof space. So that gets clubbed under a negative sentiment, indicating that the consumer has some kind of a problem in doing that kind of a RE model. Now, what was the result? What did we find? We found 5 enablers. And those enablers can be categorized in economic enablers, organizational, operational, technological, and social. I'm just going to briefly summarize these for you. But primarily, the biggest driver that we found to be motivating these consumers to move towards renewables is the expensive nature of grid-based supply. A CNI consumer will pay anywhere between 11 to 12 rupees if it is a grid-based supply. But if it does its own RE capacity, either through rooftop or captive power plants, then the cost of renewable energy-based supply comes substantially down. In organization companies, there are large companies that now have dedicated renewable targets. I can name Google, Microsoft to be some of those companies that have targets not only for themselves, but they also have for their own business partners. Small and medium enterprises are active in creating RE targets from themselves, but they are very slow in following this. In operational issues, renewable energy procurement has become easy because there are many market players today. If today you want to install a rooftop solar in your house, you just have to reach out to the right developers and there'll be a dime a dozen who would want to do this project for you. In technological drivers, there are lots of new technologies that are coming. So solar panels are becoming more efficient. Small hydro may become possible in the years to come. Not only are models improving, they are giving you better efficiency, they're giving you better generation, and some of them are even weather resistant. In social factors, we saw that there's a lot of social peer effect, which means that if one company is doing a rooftop project, other company gets motivated, and through the word of mouth, those renewable projects are expanding. But what we found to be more overwhelming were challenges. Companies are finding it hard to deal with the high capital cost of doing renewable projects. Large companies can still make way, but SMEs are struggling. There are regulatory barriers. Laws, regulations, applicable fees, they're all changing. Not only are they changing frequently, the impact of changes are not fully known to these consumers. Third, technology is rapidly changing. Dr. Nali spoke about hydrogen. We also found in our study that consumers are waiting to see what new technology comes. Some of them are waiting for hydrogen, Some of them are waiting for fuel cells. And the overwhelming feeling is, let's wait and watch if better technology comes up. As a result of which, the current pace of projects is slowing down. In organizational factors, we see a lot of companies going through what we call in academic research, roof space loss aversion. People don't want to let go of their idle roof space because they may want to use it for later, for let's say a warehouse or for offsites. And the capital commitment in RE projects is conflicting with other business decisions. In social issues, peer networks are not very strong in small and medium enterprises. Small companies don't get to spread the word of mouth that large companies are able to. Add to that, project developers, the people who help do these projects, do not necessarily approach SMEs because of small capital investment size. Largely, and I think this is the most important finding for our study, is consumer information is not complete. Consumers don't fully understand all market models for RE purchase. So even a small medium enterprise will not know that a rooftop solar is possible, will not know that a captive is possible, will not know that an open access is possible. Not only do they not know the market models, they don't also understand what are the benefits and cost of each model. And finally, there are logistical issues as well. For example, there may not be enough roof space because of shadowing effect. Or people who work out of rented premises may need owner's permission. Or they may not have land to install their own captive projects. So as a result of these findings, we found 7 barriers and we found 5 enablers. And based on this, we recommended certain interventions. I am aware of the time limit, so I don't want to talk about the recommendations here. But in case any of you are interested, you can always reach out to me or even ask me questions at the end of the session, and I'll be happy to answer them in response to this presentation. So thank you very much. That's it from me. Back to you, Matthew.
Thank you, Dr. Vasantara, for sharing your in-depth research on energy transition. Next, we have Ms. Tulika, co-founder and CEO of SunGreen H2, a talented entrepreneur whose company focuses on green hydrogen manufacturing technology. Ms. Tulika, please.
Thank you, Matthew. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, but we are viewing in your presenter mode.
Let's try again. Second. How is the screen looking now?
Yes, better now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Pleased to meet you all and very happy to be here talking about SunGreen H2 and how we are unlocking green hydrogen using nanotechnology. So essentially, SunGreen H2 is a Singapore headquartered SME. We are developing and commercializing a breakthrough electrolyzer component technology for low-cost renewable hydrogen production for wide-scale applications. The technology is basically a result of over 10 years of expertise in research of nanotechnology and electrochemistry, and essentially is using sort of nanoscale renewable energy generation know-how to bring forth electrodes and other core components for electrolyzers, the machines used for making green hydrogen. Let me explain a little bit more about where the company is based and how we are tackling this issue. So green hydrogen is a pretty much global market. While we are based in Singapore, we have offices in Melbourne as well as London. And as you can see here, some of the customers that we work with are really based over in the Western Hemisphere, so in your Americas as well as the European Union, and closer to home in the Asia Pacific region, Japan, South Korea, and Australia are really large markets for the further development of green hydrogen. So let's take a step back and look at what we're trying to do with hydrogen. Hydrogen is not a new market. There is a lot of hydrogen in use in the world already. Mostly, as you can see from this slide, it's in use by industry. And within industry, it's really your fertilizer, steel making, chemicals, and other heavy industry that are using a lot of hydrogen-based feedstock and fuel at the moment. The IEA expects that hydrogen use, being a completely emissions-free fuel, is set to grow in the next 30 years to 2050 and could really play a good role in terms of delivering a decarbonized future energy system. But this largely depends on increasing the use of hydrogen, stepping this up, but also decarbonizing the production of hydrogen at the same time. So if you look a little bit more closely, you can see that over the years to 2050, it is largely predicted that the low carbon share of hydrogen, and specifically within that, I'd like to point out green hydrogen, is set to expand really exponentially over just the next decade, not to mention out to 2050. Let's take a look at what we mean by that. So most of the world's hydrogen at the moment, as you can see from this slide, is made from fossil fuels, natural gas or coal, and this is called gray hydrogen. And if you have a way of capturing the carbon dioxide that's generated from this hydrogen when it's steam methane reformed into hydrogen, then you've got something called blue hydrogen, where one more additional technology is needed after the reforming process, and it's carbon capture. And then, of course, we can never step away from carbon capture without thinking about utilization and sequestration of this carbon, because you can't just capture the carbon, you've got to be able to do something with it. And this is blue hydrogen. As you can see that the technical complexity for going from the existing ways of using or making hydrogen as gray hydrogen based, as this increases, the cost of the technology also increases. In other words, if it's costing $1 to $2 per kg to make, let's say, gray hydrogen, then we are already in the $3 to $5 range for blue hydrogen once you include carbon capture and sequestration on top of the steam reforming. One way to make completely zero carbon hydrogen is using green energy or renewable electricity. And this is electrolysis of water, splitting H2O molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. It is a zero carbon method of producing hydrogen. However, as you can see, its current market share is really low, as well as its current cost is really high. And of course, when you think about the hydrogen landscape, at the moment you hear of lots of colors. Apart from gray, blue, and green, you also hear about pink hydrogen, you hear about turquoise. And these are very many different ways of using different types of electricity, like nuclear to make pink hydrogen, or using another technology called methane pyrolysis, for example, to make turquoise hydrogen. So why are we into so much hydrogen production methods, and what's going on? We already have so much. 90 million tons of hydrogen is being produced in the world. Why do we need more ways of making it? Simply because the fossil fuel reforming method of making hydrogen, which is almost 99.5% actually of the market as of date, creates 10 times as much carbon dioxide emissions for every ton of hydrogen made in this manner. In other words, we are talking about nearly 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions are currently associated with the production of conventional hydrogen or gray hydrogen. And if you can switch, let's say, to a zero carbon way of producing this hydrogen, water electrolysis and green hydrogen is one method, then you are essentially talking about a way to essentially take out 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions from the atmosphere. So that all sounds very good. It's a great way to put us on a decarbonized way of producing hydrogen. And of course, when hydrogen burns, it also doesn't produce any emissions. Then, you have a very clean, zero carbon way of producing the fuel. And then when you burn the fuel, there are no emissions. So it's an end-to-end zero carbon game. So what's the issue? Why isn't the world already using so much of this? Because if you could use it, then, suddenly you've got a way of having a zero carbon fuel and feedstock for our industrial use cases, for all the steel, chemical industry, the fertilizer industry, all our major heavy industries can start to use an end-to-end zero carbon way. And we're suddenly talking about really reducing a lot of carbon dioxide emissions from the atmosphere. Not to mention newer use cases for this kind of zero carbon hydrogen or green hydrogen. You could use it to power your long distance transportation fleets. You could use it to power, start to replace electricity and heat generation in homes, and also use it for long-term renewable energy storage, for example. It's some of these new sort of use cases that are emerging, as well as the ability to replace gray hydrogen in the existing use cases, that is really driving the explosive growth that we talked about in the green hydrogen market going forward. So if it's also hunky-dory, then, what's the holdup? The holdup is that Globally, industrial decarbonization policy, including in this part of the world, and Singapore has itself come out with its energy transition plan as well as its green plan, largely in Asia Pacific, but mostly driven also by the EU, Japan, South Korea, and the US and Canada. We are seeing a lot of legislative landslide that is driving the focus and the adoption of green hydrogen. However, the production cost, as we saw earlier, can be nearly 5 times more expensive than fossil fuel-based hydrogen. So there is no way to take anything and get it to be widely used unless it is at cost parity with the conventional systems, regardless of the carbon dioxide emissions. On the previous speaker, I was really appreciating what you said, because at the end of the day, people are price sensitive. They may be carbon dioxide and emission sensitive. We may have respiratory diseases and affect our own health by air pollution. But at the end of the day, the economic reality is that unless we are cost agnostic between the dirty and the clean technology, there's always going to be a low cost incentive to adopt dirty technology, or let's say carbon dioxide intensive energy. And so this is the issue that needs to be solved for green hydrogen. If we are to make it very widely used across industry, across transport sectors, across energy storage, power and heating sectors. Now, we need two things to make green hydrogen. You just need renewable electricity to power up and electrolyze a machine, and then you need water. Water is not considered a bottleneck to the adaptability of green hydrogen. Renewable electricity, unless it becomes, until date, since 1990, there has been research happening in green hydrogen. One of the reasons why green hydrogen was not ready for commercial scale applications to date is because in the initial days, renewable electricity was expensive. However, today renewable electricity is cheap and getting cheaper by the day. In 91% of the world's electricity generation markets, the cheapest form of new generation is either wind or solar. So now we finally have a cheap, low cost way of powering up electrolyzers with green electricity, which is created without any carbon dioxide emissions, and use water and split that water into hydrogen and oxygen. So we finally have the enabling factors ready for the green hydrogen market to really start, ramping up or scaling up. But electrolyzer technology still remains as one of the bottlenecks to affordable green hydrogen at the moment. The technology has been around for 100 years. There's a couple of different versions of these technologies, and they really are the last remaining bottleneck to affordable green hydrogen being unlocked. What do I mean by that? Today's electrolyzers are expensive and inefficient. If you look at the market-leading technology, it's alkaline electrolyzers. It is almost 100 years old, and this technology has been around for a very long time. It's quite low cost actually on the capex side. However, it needs a very stable source of electricity to be fed to it. So this is not very compatible, or less compatible, if you like, with intermittent source of renewable electricity, which is wind and solar, and quite variable in nature. So the response time of this technology and its efficiency as a result, or the amount of electricity used to create 1 kg of green hydrogen, is not great. On the other hand, we have the 20-year-old commercialized technology, which is proton exchange membrane, or PEM electrolyzer technology. Between these two technologies, alkaline and PEM hold almost all of the market share. And this technology does a very good job and is highly efficient and does a very good job of producing green hydrogen from renewable electricity. It has a very fast response time and can, match the load interruptibility of renewable electricity very well. The problem is that in order to have this kind of a high performance, this technology is very reliant. PEM electrolyzers are very reliant on precious metals, platinum, gold, iridium, and titanium, right? So these are materials that are more suited to in jewelry boxes than to industrial scale machines. And not only is the cost a bit of a challenge when you scale up, but also certain materials pose a critical constraint in terms of resourcing. In other words, there is not enough iridium available in the world, for example, to make, let's say, hundreds of gigawatts of electrolyzers. So then we come to the emerging technologies. There is one mentioned here, anion exchange membrane, but if you look at electrolyzer innovation, you will see there are a number of different types of additional technologies like solid oxide, membrane-free, capillary-fed electrolyzers. All of these newer innovative technologies are really emerging only mainly because the existing technologies have certain gaps that need to be filled, and the incumbent technologies need to be improved in a certain way. So these are the innovation needs that are basically faced by the electrolyzer industry that the emerging technologies in their own way, shape, or form are trying to address. Where does Sungreen H2 come into this? So we are commercializing some research that has been done, undertaken by our CTO, Dr. Saeed Masoodi Panah. And what we are doing is we are taking very low cost, earth abundant materials, and out of them we are creating the core components of electrolyzers, which are extremely high efficiency, extremely durable, and very low cost. In other words, these are plug and play components, so they're very drop in to existing electrolyzer designs. So when you drop in these components into, let's say, alkaline PEM, AEM, or other types of existing commercially available electrolyzers, they're able to double the amount of green hydrogen that's produced from the same electrolyzer cell. We're able to reduce by 30 times the amount of platinum group metals that is used for high performance in the PEM electrolyzers. It's completely platinum group metal free for alkaline and AEM. And what this does is this leads to a 50% decreased stack capex cost. In other words, the hydrogen production part of the machine essentially needs to be halved in size, and in terms of footprint, as well as in terms of saving of costs, that's pretty significant because you're able to double the amount of hydrogen that you're producing from a single type of electrolyzer cell. And we also reduce the amount of energy consumed by the electrolyzer by 10%. And this reduction in energy is only going to increase over time. So what do I mean by some of these core components for electrolyzers? All electrolyzers are made of a stack, which is made of a repeating bunch of cells. And these cells are the key building blocks for hydrogen production in any electrolyzer. And taking a look at like how we're using advanced materials in electrolyzer cells, then what we do is we basically take the anode and the cathode materials that are used for electrolyzers and drastically reduce the amount of platinum group metals loaded into these as catalysts. So we reduce the amount of platinum used, we reduce the amount of iridium used. We also reduce the amount of platinization that's required with another component called the porous transport layer, which is typically titanium felt and is then platinized in order to make it very stable. And finally, the other really expensive components in electrolyzers are bipolar plates. These are end plates within the electrolyzer cell that are often made with titanium in the case of PEM electrolyzers because it's got very long-lasting durability and is then often coated with gold and platinum in order to make in order to achieve anti-corrosion and conductive properties in the field. What we do is we replace these titanium bipolar plates as well with a lower cost material like stainless steel and other materials. And we also put our proprietary coating on top of the bipolar plates in order to significantly reduce and eliminate the use of gold and platinum for these coatings. So with this type of advanced materials-based replacement of the materials that are used inside the core components of electrolyzers, we're able to reduce cost, improve performance, and improve durability. The technology is under patent, and we are now starting to commercialize this technology by working with some of the leading electrolyzer manufacturers in the world, as well as with hydrogen end users for demonstrating both the components, but also the components standalone, but also working in a whole subsystem or a system. What do I mean by that? We manufacture all the electrolyzer components as well, and the buyers of these components, for example, are your electrolyzer manufacturers in the alkaline and the PEM space. But we also showcase our component technology in a standalone AEM electrolyzer stack and system in order to showcase the full capability of the materials to provide an end-to-end hydrogen generation solution. We believe that the work that we're doing in terms of commercializing this research is really relevant for the industry because what it helps to do is by plugging and playing these components into all types of existing commercially available electrolyzers, what you're able to do is you'll be able to lower the overall cost of green hydrogen coming out from electrolyzers. And this is the need of the hour to make green hydrogen more cost competitive with the gray hydrogen or the fossil fuel based hydrogen that's currently in use by industry. So what we're basically trying to do is we're trying to get green hydrogen to be more cost competitive in the distributed hydrogen stack for applications as shown here in terms of, feedstock or fuel or eventually to power a fuel cell. So wrapping up this presentation, we are an experienced team commercializing over 10 years of research in this space, and we've won a number of recent awards and grants for the work that we have been doing. And yeah, we're very excited to be at this talk simply because we hope that amongst yourselves in the audience, there are a number of green hydrogen enthusiasts who are excited and encouraged by the idea of a decarbonized, democratized energy future and would like to work with us. So we invite anybody in the audience who is currently looking at considering, an experience, an internship, a career in a fascinating new green hydrogen technology, to reach out to us and contact us. Yep, come and join us if you're interested in unlocking green hydrogen to deliver deep decarbonization. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Tulika, on your company's specialty in green hydrogen manufacturing technology. Last but certainly not least, we have Professor Manaswita from IIT Bombay with years of experience and multiple publications regarding fluid dynamics. Professor Manaswita, please.
Hello. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Okay, we can see your screen. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay. Right. So today's topic, women in green energy. When Anoki approached me, I was in dilemma. Women, it's okay. Green energy. And when I looked at my volume of work, I wasn't able to fit myself in green energy. Very little work in green energy. So I wasn't quite ready to say yes. And I was little reluctant to say no to Anoki. Yeah, so that's the background. But before I start my talk, greetings to all my co-panelists, Dr. Nali, Dr. Vasundhara, and Tulika. And thanks, Matthew. Okay, then what happened? I happened to have attended a meeting with Saltex. They have a technology with thermochemical storage. Thermochemical storage, yes, it is green energy. And why? And that meeting changed my view, and I said yes to Anoki. And why is that so? Look at their technology. In their technology, they use calcium carbonate for hydration of calcium carbonate reaction for energy storage, thermochemical storage, okay, which is known. But what is the technology? They use powdered calcium carbonate, nano-coated, and they store the uncharged salt in a silo. They use aeromechanical technology to fill the reactor for the charger. This is a downcomer. Charged salt is again stored in a silo, and they use the discharger. The discharger is a fluidized bed reactor. There you go. I work with granular materials, and I found my connection with green energy. Silo, downcomer, again silo, fluidization. Fluidization is a technology which is a fairly new technology, which is used in biomass gasification and thermochemical energy storage. Okay, and I said to say yes to Anoki. Now, unlike the other three talks today, my talk is going to be on the technology itself. And that's what Anoki said when he shared the guidelines with us. We have to talk about a technology and our research components. I'll take you quickly through my research, through the research of my group, and my direct share to my direct contribution to the green energy itself. Before I get into fluidization technology, I'll define what granular materials is. It's a large collection of small particles, which sizes may range from a few microns, dust particles, to a few kilometers, asteroids, few hundreds to few millions of particles. When I say large collection, this large may be few hundreds to few millions of particles. In a fluidized bed, we have millions of particles. And what do I mean by large, small? When do I say small particles? What is that small particles? Are they of molecular scale? No, they're large enough such that the molecular fluctuations is negligible. This Kb here is the Boltzmann constant. Kbt is negligible. Materials, anything that you can think of. starting from your kitchen to beach sand, to the sand in the hourglass, wood chips in biomass gasifier, biomass pellets, anything that you can think of falls under this material. I have written 2. Why did I write 2? Because in biomass gasifier, one actually mixes sand and wood and then gasifies. Granular materials show a wide range of non-intuitive phenomena. I wanted to show one phenomena today. I wanted to do a demo experiment, but that may not be possible, but I will just describe this phenomena. Suppose if you take 2 bottles with a straw. Now, if one bottle is filled with water, and if you press the bottle, what do you expect? Come on, students, what do you expect if you fill a bottle with water, and if you press it, you expect the water level to go high up in the straw. But if you fill a bottle with sand, you fill the bottle with sand and then pour water in it, the initial level is here. If you press the bottle, the water level comes down. Any idea why it happens? The sand inside reorganizes itself and creates some space. The interstitial space increases, and the water fills those space and water level goes down. That means granular material undergoes dilation. Why did I choose this demo experiment? What does dilation have to do with fluidization? Let us discuss what fluidization itself is and why fluidization is becoming a technology, a preferred technology for green energy as well as any shades of energy. Okay. Fluidization is a technology where you have a bed of solid particles and you pass fluid through it. It can be liquid, it can be gas. At certain fluid velocity, the pressure drop across the bed equalizes the weight of the bed itself. And at that point, the particles, the solid particles get dislodged from each other. So the moment the solid particles get dislodged from each other, let me see if there is a pointer. The moment the solid particles get dislodged from each other, the entire surface area becomes available to the fluid. So if there is a heat transfer taking place, if there is mass transfer taking place, or if there is a reaction taking place, the entire surface area of the solid particles becomes available. So naturally the efficiency goes high up. So whether it is green energy or any darker shades of energy, any other shades of energy, as a reactor, as a unit operation or unit process equipment, fluidized beds are becoming more and more preferred. Okay, these equations are design equations. And why is dilation connected? The moment it becomes fluidized at minimum fluidization point, the bed expands, that is the bed dilates. If you keep on increasing the gas velocity, the bed keeps on increasing, then gas bubbles start forming inside the bed. If you keep reducing the gas velocity, that is, there is a hysteresis in the bed is observed and bed gets compacted. Okay, let's move on. Right. So this is the entire fluidization regime mapping. The bed pressure drop is plotted against the fluid velocity. Initially, there is a fixed bed, which is also there are fixed bed gasifiers. Like inside the bed, here the bed particles do not move at all. The fluid is flown through the packed bed, and then at certain point, the dilation happens. This is the point where the particles get dislodged from each other, and these are the two examples we have already seen in biomass gasifier, in thermochemical storage, discharging phase. And then as we keep on increasing the gas velocity, bubbling takes place. It goes to a slugging bed, that is the bubbles keep growing and starts occupying almost the entire cross section of the bed, and then entrainment starts. entrained bed is also a technology which is used in gasifiers, and then circulating fluidized bed is yet another technology which is used in gasifiers. One of the speakers said, I think Dr. Vasundhara highlighted on energy efficiency. The new gasifiers are used based on circulating fluidized bed technology. Okay. Now, particles classification. It's not only that the fluid velocity that decides what kind of regimes that the the bed will behave. It's also the nature of particles, and there is a classical particle size classification that is there with us, depending on the what kind of particles we are using, density of the particles versus the particle diameter. So there are 4 different regimes: A, B, C, and D. C is here. C actually stands for cohesive particle, which is very, very difficult to fluidize. A and B are easy to fluidize. D is spoutable, spout-like bed. So if you know the density of the particles, you can choose the particle size, and you know how the bed is going to behave. So here the dots that you are going to see, that you are seeing, like blue, green, purple, and maroon, perhaps maroon, the same particles, a sand particle. I have chosen sand particle intentionally. You see, if you have something around 1000 micron, that the bed is going to behave like a spouting bed. If it is somewhere around 500 micron, 300 micron, it is going to be very nicely fluidized bed. It is called sand-like particle because most of the experiments have happened with sand or glass particles, glass ballotinis. Arretable particles, arretable bed, and then this is cohesive bed, very difficult to fluidize. If you have polymer-like particles, wood chips and all, then size distribution is slightly different. If you have iron beads, then the size distribution is going to be different. Now let us look at the development of technology. I said that fluidization is a very new technology. Why did I say so? First, it was used, commercial production happened in 1942, first production facility of cracking using fluidization. So cracking of petroleum for petrochemical production by Exxon. And then during 1945, fluidized beds were used for rubber production. So it's just 80 years old technology. In terms of technology, it is actually fairly new technology. You think of water splitting reaction, you think of any other technology, they're actually older than this technology. Okay. And then this is a development curve. Modeling, phenomenological modeling started happening in 1950s, design equations and all. Again in 1950s, they're still in use because all the design calculations are based on the development that happened in 1950s, 1960s. Seminal work happened between 1960s and 1970s, continuum description of fluidized bed. Closure happened in 1980s. Work is still going on. Research is very much active. A different kind of work happened in 1990 where individual particles in this fluidized bed were being tracked. In 1992, to be precise, actually this work came into publication, and research is very much active with the focus of simulating large system with millions of particles, making the algorithms more efficient, understanding fluid phase turbulence, wide size distribution of particles. Experiments are not actually anywhere behind these simulation methods. We are using different sophisticated experimentation technologies like X-ray tomography, visualization methods to understand the flow within the fluidized bed. Now, what is the research in our group? We are working with binary mixture with a primary focus on biomass gasification. In biomass gasification, biomass pellets are mixed with sand-like particles. So there are two distinctly different particles, and distinctly different particles, if are mixed in fluidized bed, they behave completely differently. The graph on the left-hand side shows the fluidization and defluidization behavior of particles with wide size distribution. It shows that the bed has a very small hysteresis, and it also marks a minimum fluidization point, though there is a departure from the fixed bed at an early point, but then it can be extrapolated. Why is there a departure? It is there is a wide size distribution. The departure is there because the small particles within the cage of the large particles start getting fluidized, and that's why there is a semi-fluidized bed. However, the line can be extrapolated. In literature, they say that if there are very wide size distribution, such a way that the size distribution has two peaks, you cannot have one such minimum fluidization velocity point. You can have one minimum fluidization velocity point and one final fluidization velocity point. However, there can be unique equations. What we have shown is, depending on the initial configuration of the bed, there are completely different nature of fluidization. I hope this video plays. You see, here we have one configuration. It is nicely bubbling fluidized bed. Here it is a slugging fluidized bed. There is a gas slug in between the bed, and one solid block is moving like on block. Okay, so this is one of our research. We do experiments as well as we do simulations. This is yet another work which is not fluidization, but it is horizontal conveying. We see sand dunes in deserts, very common. I have shown only one dune, but there are several dunes which are seen. We have seen pictures, and if we visit deserts or beaches, we can see different types of dunes. These dunes can be seen in labs as well. We have observed them. Why do they happen? They are formed due to the turbulence attenuation, particle deposition and resuspension. We are working on them using high-speed imaging and trying to understand the exact mechanism why the dunes form in the pipe. We are also performing DEM simulations wherein we are trying to simulate cohesive particles by using the potential of spring dashpot, putting a spring between two particles and a dashpot and adding the van der Waals potential. Now, to summarize our research work in the group, fluidized bed is a relatively new technology, about 80 years old, that widely used in energy and renewable energy technologies such as thermochemical storage system, biomass gasification. They show a wide variety of phenomena which are yet under the scope of research, and that's where we come in. Visualization experiments and detailed simulations are complementary to each other. Now, having shown our indirect connection to green and other shades of energy, we are showing a direct contribution to green energy. We have worked with energy storage system, thermal energy storage system, which can be used for solar thermal energy storage system. Here we have developed a thermocline based single tank, single media thermocline storage system, which has shown the least thermocline thickness, which is about 20% least as compared to the present day literature. With that, I come to an end of our group's research, and coming to today's topic, women in energy. I was doing a little bit of research on that. Renewable energy employs about 32% women. Conventional sector, about 22% women. In STEM, women at workforce is 28%. Women in STEM higher education is 35%. So there is a 7% of drop from higher education to workforce. At IIT Bombay, which is a technological institute, we have roughly about 22% girl student, and we are about 15% of female faculty. With that acknowledgement, my teachers, supervisor, collaborators, funding agencies who help us do research, colleagues, students, and my family. And with that, a thank you, a big thank you to all of you. And back to you, Matthew.
Thank you, Professor Manaswita, for your sharing in fluid dynamics incorporated into clean energy. We'll be moving on to the Q&A session. Yeah, so we do have a question from Chanrik to each of the speaker. How would your research contribute to the development of the circular economy and consequently the green economy and its associated ecosystem? Anyone can take the question.
Okay, I'm happy to kick off. So one of the things that I would mention is, for circularity and for sustainability, we need to conserve our resources better. Most ways of extracting natural resources today are extremely energy intensive, can be damaging to the environment. And one way to arrest and slow this down is to be circular in terms of reusing and reducing the amount of materials that we use. One of the things that SunGreen H2's technology does is reduces the use of rare and expensive precious metals like platinum, iridium, gold, titanium by 30 times. What this means is that your limited resources in this regard go much, much further, and there's less burden of intensive mining for critically limited materials before being able to put them out for our end users in the energy sector. And secondly, by reducing the amount of energy consumed overall, what we're trying to do is make the act of producing green hydrogen more efficient, which means that your limited renewable resources, which may seem unlimited, but at the end of the day, you have to put a lot of hundreds of gigawatts of electrolyzer of renewable electricity plants in the field just for electrolysis alone, which means that that's over on top of what your wind and solar renewable energy plants need to be installed as. We try to reduce this amount of energy that is being required for electrolysis at the moment at 10%. But certainly some of the aspects of research that we're further working on is to unlock sort of, a different type of technology that can 10x reduce the amount of energy consumed as well. So yeah, that's how I would say we're certainly trying to make limited resources go further for more circularity and sustainability in this space. Thanks.
Any of the other speakers would like to take up the question? Okay, then we will just move on to the next question. From Shinjini to Ms. Tulika, do you think availability of water will be an issue for green H2 production in a water-constrained country like India?
Thanks for the question. Water constraint is actually not a restriction, is not a constraint actually for electrolysis. If you think about most immediate uses for green hydrogen, they are to replace the use of gray hydrogen in existing industrial use cases. In other words, the 90 million tons of gray hydrogen that's being used in industry today. Water usage for electrolysis in this regard is no different from the water that is used in, let's say, more or less within range of the gray hydrogen production process. So in that sense, it's not there's no increased burden of water usage. And one thing to remember, unlike with gray hydrogen, which is using industrial water, electrolysis in future will be done from seawater, wastewater, so aiding again on the circularity and the sustainability of the solution. So no, in fact, water use is not a constraint for electrolysis.
Okay, thank you. Another question regarding green hydrogen. Can you introduce on the differences in estimated emission from the production process in gray, blue, green hydrogen technologies? And in addition, what about the cost variance and diversity depend on electrolysis methods in green hydrogen?
Okay, this is a very popular topic. Thanks for the question. So I'd covered a little bit earlier, happy to go through this again, but in summary, the current method of producing gray hydrogen from fossil fuels essentially costs around $1 to $2 per kg. That's a production cost. On a like-for-like basis, this means that you are producing at least 10 till 20 tons of carbon dioxide emissions for every single ton of hydrogen produced from natural gas or coal. So the figures to remember are cost, $1 to $2 per kg, and carbon dioxide emissions 10 to 20 times as much as the hydrogen produced. Now let's take a switch away and let's look at blue hydrogen. So if we find a way to have the perfect carbon capture and use and sequestration solution, CCUS, that can retroactively strip out the carbon that is generated, the 10 to 20 times carbon that is generated from the gray hydrogen process, then you are looking still, because CCS is not a perfect technology and there is no 100% method of reducing, and removing carbon capture and utilizing it and sequestering it known to the world at this point, then you are still looking at up to 4 times as much carbon dioxide emissions being created from the blue hydrogen process residually. And this is not accounting for the amount of methane leakage that happens. And if you start to really do a full life cycle accounting from the methane leakage into the atmosphere, then this carbon dioxide emission footprint for gray and blue climbs quite high. And costs for blue hydrogen essentially increase from, let's say, the $1 to $2 per kg for gray hydrogen to around 2.5 to 3, 5 to up to $5, depending on commodity prices, of course, for blue hydrogen. So these are the costs to keep in mind. For green hydrogen, of course, it is a zero carbon way of producing hydrogen, simply because you are dependent on using renewable electricity, which is considered zero carbon, and then you're not producing any carbon dioxide emissions. So zero is a number to remember for green hydrogen. And then in terms of cost, it can tend to vary very widely with the levelized cost of electricity in your part of the world, but in most of the parts of the world which are considered really great natural resource rich regions for producing green hydrogen, where there's lots of sunlight, lots of hydro, lots of wind, or other sorts of renewable resourcing for electricity, then this can be as low as 3 and as high as up to $6 per kg. But of course, this can vary quite largely with your renewable electricity cost. Suffice to say that, however, with the kind of innovation that we're talking about these days, it is not far off for green hydrogen to be at cost parity with at least blue and even gray within the 2025 to 2030 period. So the number to remember here is that the cost is $3 to $6 per kg, but coming down quite rapidly. And by 2025, we should see it at parity with blue, if not lower, given where commodity prices have recently climbed to on oil and gas side. And then the rest tends to vary. So pink hydrogen, for example, when you have nuclear, and the electricity cost, the capex cost for nuclear plants, as we know, is quite large. But of course, again, the carbon dioxide emissions are zero. The safety and the HSE kind of requirements for nuclear energy handling also raise up the overall cost. So if you think about pink hydrogen, then those costs really start to climb up in the $6 to $8 per kg on a like-for-like comparison basis, and so on and so forth. So I hope I could answer your question around the carbon dioxide emissions and the costs of various colors of hydrogen.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for the Q&A, but feel free to contact any of the presenters afterwards. So thank you so much, Dr. Nali, Dr. Vasanhura, Ms. Tulika, and Professor Manaswita. So that concludes the Q&A for our final session and the International Energy Symposium 2022. We hope that this has been an enriching 2 days for everyone. I would like to thank everyone for attending this symposium. It will not be possible without every one of you. I would like, next will be a very big thank you to all the presenters who have taken time out of their busy schedules to give us an insight and expertise in their respective fields. Lastly, the hosts from the energy clubs in IIT Bombay in India, TU Delft in the Netherlands, and NTU in Singapore for hosting and organizing this event. Thank you, everyone. Every small action counts towards change. Stay safe. Thank Thank you so much. You may now take your leave.
Thanks. Bye.